Hi everyone and good afternoon. Hopefully you would have just seen an intro video with lots of the great work that we've produced recently. Firstly, welcome to our masterclass on why it's time to burn your annual marketing plan. So today we are live across LinkedIn, StreamYard and YouTube. And it's really, really great to see so many sign-ups today. So thank you. We can see that everybody is starting to come along now. So we will begin very shortly. A quick mention though, as we go, please do feel free to pop any questions into the chat box. We do have a Q&A at the end, so we'll be answering any questions then. So yeah, it'll be great to hear from you. But before we start, and while we're just waiting for more people to join, I'll just start with some really quick introductions. So firstly, a brief introduction to us. So for those of you who don't know us, we are Logic and Magic. We're a fully integrated agency offering in-house creative, production, strategy, UX, web, TV, as well as social. And a quick introduction to ourselves as well. So I'm Alana, client partner across Logic and Magic. I'll be your host today. And it's my pleasure to introduce Emma Hodgkinson, who's our strategy and channel director. So Emma, I'll hand over to you so you can do a quick intro.
Great, thank you so much. So hello everyone, I'm delighted to be here speaking to you today. And I want to tell you a little bit about me. So my expertise is all things research, insight, strategy and planning. And my passion is helping brands grow and businesses thrive through the lens of being truly customer-centric. I also lead our marketing execution teams across creative, social, and SEO. And you can see on the screen both mine and Alana's email address. And if you've got any questions, please get in touch. We would love to hear from you. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the reasons behind why we chose this topic. And in my career, I've spent significant time both in-house for large retail organisations and also agency side. And the annual marketing plan and planning process is something that I've been part of from both perspectives, whether that's the in-house scramble trying to get it done, or being in agency, being briefed by a client, usually with little time, to pull something together. There are some fundamental challenges with the annual marketing plan and the process, which we'll discuss, and hopefully you'll come away from the session feeling like there might be a better approach to take when thinking about your own marketing journey. So in the next 45 minutes, you'll learn the marketing landscape, the annual marketing process and what typically happens, how to break the cycle, and some tips, plus why you need the right expertise. And stay tuned, because at the end of today's session, we'll be letting you know how you can win a bonus giveaway. So shall we get started? And into the first section, which is all about the marketing landscape. And whether you're a marketing manager, head of, director, or even C-suite, it's harder than ever at the moment to be in the industry. And we're seeing some green shoots of a more optimistic and positive future, which is great, but there are still some challenges. So the first one is around budgets. So this year and into next, businesses are investing in their marketing spend, but we also know that some others are also reducing their spend. There are great categories for increased investment though: events, DM, PR, media, and sales and promotions. But actually, even when you've got that increased investment, knowing the best way to spend it for the biggest customer and business benefit can be a challenge in itself. A second challenge is around talent shortage. So nearly half of all advertisers, agencies, ad tech companies and media owners think that the industry is facing its worst ever crisis when it comes to talent. And actually, there's a lot of conversation over the last few years around colleague well-being and also the right training and development for those starting out in their career. Another challenge is around ad spend decline. So real-term ad spend declined 0.6% in 2023 and is projected to decline 0.7% this year. Even though the marketing landscape is a challenging place, we still see businesses and brands have bigger ambitions than ever before. So increasing brand awareness is the primary goal when running marketing campaigns, according to just under half of marketing directors. This is followed by driving engagement and also increasing revenue. It's fair to say, though, that in terms of those challenges, there are some common themes. So the 5 biggest challenges that marketing directors face are training their teams, measuring the ROI of marketing activity, getting that important sales and marketing alignment, and also growing a global audience.
And you might have seen some of our other webinars that we've been running. We love to do a quick poll just to sort of get everybody involved and give you a chance to have your say. So the question we want to ask you today is, up to what % of marketing budgets go wasted every year? So if you can pop A, B, C or D into the chat, and also any reasons why, would love to hear those as well. So just to recap on the question, up to what % of marketing budgets go wasted every year? Is it A, 20%, B, 40%, C, 60%, or D, 80%? So you can see there's quite a varied answer set there, and I'm sure this will be different for every business. So for some it might be higher, and for some it might be lower, but it's obviously that up to percentage. I can imagine any size of wasted budget is a big concern for marketing managers. So yeah, it's important to also think about what that percentage might be in your business as well. So I'll just give a few moments here so you can add your guesses. I was certainly shocked to see the answer of this, if it was any indication, if that helps. And Emma, I think, did you expect it to be what it is as well?
Definitely was a surprise to me, and I think we're probably giving a bit away there, Alana, but yeah, it's very interesting. I think sometimes when you think about how much of that money is actually wasted every year.
Yeah, exactly. So I can see lots of B's coming in, a few C's. I think probably mostly B's so far. So let's see if you're right. So the answer is, in fact, C, so even more at 60%. So obviously not everybody's business will be 60%, but that is still a really high number if you think about it, of marketing budgets that are actually being wasted each year that, you know, could be utilised in better ways. So let's dig into that a little bit more, Emma, shall we?
Absolutely. And that wastage overall is just the tip of the iceberg. We see less than 10% of organisations successfully execute their strategy, which is such a low number given all of the effort that goes into marketing strategy and planning. A third of the marketing budget can go to waste due to poor briefs and misdirected work. And actually a quarter of the budget can also go to waste due to ineffective channels and strategies. And actually those last two in particular are ones that are actually, as marketing leads and heads, within our control. You know, we can make sure that those briefs are as strong and that the work is right, and that also we're utilising the right channels and strategy. So I know there's a high percentage of wastage, but I actually think some of that wastage is within our control within marketing to try and reduce where we can. And that lack of focus typically comes from too many priorities. I know that when we think about what our marketing needs to achieve, it tends to be quite a lot at the same time. So it might be that our marketing, you know, as we saw earlier, marketing directors have that big goal to raise brand awareness. But actually, in a tough economic background, we also know that we must communicate price and value to increase sales. But don't forget quality, because that usually creeps in there as well. We also want marketing to communicate and maintain a great customer experience. We know that we need to stand out in a crowded market against a fierce competitor set. We also, with marketing, need to increase the number of new customers and also retain our current customer base and build those all-important relationships. We also need to communicate newness and innovation, especially if we're in a product or service-led business. It might be that we also need to change perception. So actually, if we've done some research that tells us that customer perception is different to the reality, we might want to think about how we start to shift that customer perception forwards. And finally, more increasingly, we're seeing the ask of marketing to communicate ESG initiatives. So actually the great work that's been done in sustainability or charity support or any other initiatives that fall under that umbrella tends to fall to the role of marketing to help communicate those key messages to customers. As well as what marketing think that marketing needs to deliver, there are also internal pressures from other departments around the business about what they need marketing to deliver. So your finance team will expect marketing to reduce spend, but maintain and even increase results. Your HR or people team will want marketing to hero colleagues and also showcase why you're a fantastic place to work to help drive recruitment. Your commercial teams will want marketing to generate maximum sales of products or service by any means possible. Your operations team will want marketing to showcase how fantastic your stores, delivery, online experiences, and your product and trading teams will want maximum exposure of products in your marketing communications plan to generate those sales. And you can see there's a lot of tension between different departments, never mind in your whole business, but actually then within what marketing needs to achieve. And actually, at an overall business level, that mindset can also be a challenge if the perception is that marketing is a cost, not a growth driver, is an overall challenge, definitely for marketers at that total business level.
Yeah, all really interesting points there, Emma. I think it is good to address that it's obviously no secret that the marketing landscape can be a challenging place. And you talked about lots of sort of different reasons there why, for example, the talent and budgets, etc. And I do think, talking of budgets, these are being wasted by ineffective planning, as we just saw from that poll question, that it can be up to 60% of budgets that are being wasted. So yeah, I would say this is pretty eye-opening. And Emma, you made a really good point actually about prioritization. I hadn't thought about it like that before, but we often do see when briefs are coming through that there are lots of different objectives. Businesses and brands might want to increase their awareness, but they might also want to do 3 other things as well. So we don't always see that prioritization coming through. And also just to touch on that final point there, that we can't forget those internal pressures from other departments. I wanted to add that we can obviously appreciate that's a really difficult one to manage. So back to you, Emma, just to talk about that annual process.
Thank you so much. So in terms of that process and what typically happens, I'm going to share with you a cycle that is predominantly taken from the retail industry. Of course, it's going to look different for every individual organisation, but hopefully you'll get the gist of what typically happens when you're stuck in that 12-month annual marketing planning cycle. So here we start, August, September. While still trying to execute the current plan, marketing planning always starts later than it should and concurrent to, for most, the busiest time of year. If you're in retail, it's that Q4 golden quarter trading period. So when we get kind of into that August and September phase, we know that annual planning needs to start, but actually we're busy, it's the middle of summer, and then colleagues are also off and getting back to routine. And naturally there, you just see a delay in that planning process starting. Once we get to October and that planning process actually does start, the timeline is condensed and there's little time for research, if any. And what typically happens there is we quickly scramble to review previous activity for any of the learnings and end up going with a bit of that, but also gut instincts and hypotheses without necessarily testing them. As we move into November, the plan then goes through multiple iterations and sign-off stages internally. And at that point, it's quite typical that it becomes subjective and opinion-driven rather than evidential as it goes through those rounds of stakeholder sign-off. And actually, as you get to that budget submission that typically happens in November, if the budget adjustment does happen, then your plan will need to change once again to reflect that. We finally get to December, the plan is signed off last minute, colleagues don't have time to be engaged, and there's no time to appoint a new agency if you need one, or even engage your existing agency partners before the plan starts in January. So as we enter the new year, we all start with the best of intentions. And actually, if you're in retail, it's focusing on value and the start of those seasonal events. So Q1 is that big value and health moment for customers, actually not just in retail, but more broadly. And internally, it's all about getting colleagues engaged on that new plan at the same time as getting them set up to deliver it straight away. And one of the challenges with this process at this point is a lot of marketing planning happens a few months out. You'd like to think that you are 2 to 3 to 6 months ahead, but because there was a delay in the plan being signed off in the first place, it's meant that at this point, not only are you trying to execute January, you're trying to get back ahead. So it's likely that you're also trying to deliver February and March. As we get into those months, the seasonal event starts, and actually we start to see some performance metrics from the last couple of months. And even at that point, some people may start to pivot away from the plan. So as we move into the year, weather and other variables impact customer behaviour, meaning reactivity increasingly creeps into the plan. By the time it's summer, the original plan is a distant memory. So Q2 starts, we're in April, it's the start of a new quarter, a new financial year for most. At that point, some might have more or less cash than planned, and those seasonal events continue. As we head into May, those bank holidays typically do change customer behaviour, along with things like weather, which do increase that need for reactivity in the plan. By the time we get to the summer months of June and July, those events are in full swing, whether that's Pride, Father's Day, Summer of Sport, or even kind of some of those long summer periods of time where we need to make sure that our customers remain engaged with us when they are out of routine. But not only is it holiday season for our customers, it's also holiday season for our colleagues internally. And with less colleagues in the business to deliver the plan, it becomes increasingly tricky. And with that, those high reactivity levels in the plan just completely become the norm. And pretty much the plan goes out the window. And so it begins again. So before you know it, you are back here trying to remember and execute the current plan, whilst also then thinking about the next year and what you need to do. And you're just back in this hamster wheel of 12-month annual planning cycle. And I want to share with you a few tips around why that typical marketing process doesn't work. So the first one is that there's no time for research because it usually starts late, but also no time to internally question what you think you know. Within every business, there are those myths about customers and customer behaviours that exist, and no one quite knows where they came from or what research kind of told us that fact. But actually, when you're time poor and you're having to go with your gut or what you know to be true, those dangerous myths can actually end up driving your plan. And if that's the case, it is a really dangerous place to be. A second challenge is that when you're in that time condensed state to get the plan done, you're either changing everything all of the time, month by month, and not giving activity time to work, or you're not changing anything at all and picking up last year's plan and delivering it again the next year and doing the same thing year after year. When we look at that typical calendar cycle of marketing planning, the challenge there that you've got is it's typically driven by events that happen every single year. That might be seasonal events, it might be promotional events, it might be trading or conferences. But the challenge you've got there is that it gives far too much room for reactivity in between those moments. And that's when the whole plan can go off the rails. With that condensed time frame, colleagues are not effectively engaged in the plan and therefore forget what they're meant to be doing and end up doing a lot of things with little impact. And actually, when we think about that colleague conversation around burnout and well-being, making sure our colleagues are focused on what they're meant to be doing to deliver the plan is a fundamental part of making sure that your plan is engaged successfully. Another challenge is that you don't see in that 12-month period any long-term changes in the brand or customer behaviour. Some metrics, such as perception, can take years to move and need continuous tracking and improvement. You are not going to change perception, or I wouldn't think that you would, doing one campaign in June and then switching to a different campaign in July and so on and so forth. You don't really see those long-term changes, and that can be a real challenge when you're looking for your brand and business to grow. And finally, by constantly changing direction, strategically and creatively, you're starting from scratch every time, which completely drains the marketing budget and adds to that wastage that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, it does. I feel like it does seem like quite a lot of stress. And actually, though, thinking about it, I think it does make sense at the busiest time of the year to focus on the teams and, you know, the peak trading periods rather than having to think of a new plan each time. Some really interesting points there. One that actually really resonates with me is the process and planning. So we know that there are certain events coming up each year. So how can we plan better for those to get the most out of your agencies and your internal teams? But also, I mean, gosh, how many times have we had it where the plan hasn't been signed off and we're waiting quite a while for that? It must be so frustrating for internal marketing teams. So I think it is useful to break down those different reasons that you had why the typical process doesn't work. So yeah, it's lots to think about there, I'd say. So how do we sort of break that cycle and start doing things differently?
Great question. So in terms of breaking the cycle, firstly, it's good practice to know the difference between these terms. Often we see them used interchangeably, and that can cause a lot of confusion. So on the left, you've got your business strategy and plan, that comprehensive document outlining the overall business strategy, goals and action plan. And it's there to guide the overall business, including financial planning and operational strategy. In the middle, you've got your marketing strategy, which details how the business engages its audience through marketing, of course, aligned back to those business objectives to ultimately drive growth. And it's really there as a purpose to set the direction and goals for all marketing efforts and inform resource focus in your teams. On the right-hand side, you've got your marketing plan, which is a tactical document outlining marketing activity and a timeline for these initiatives to go live. And the purpose of that is to effectively implement the strategy along with those key tactics. So to break the cycle, we need to move away from a start to finish tactical annual marketing plan to the creation and delivery of a medium-term marketing strategy. So at the top, we've got our clearly defined marketing strategy that stakeholders around the business and marketing colleagues are aligned to, and also the investment required. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Underneath that then sits your marketing roadmap, where you take those big chunky objectives and span them across the 3 years, and then all of your activity falls within those programs. Big goals, and there's just some examples on here, like brand awareness, driving engagement, changing perception, as I've said before, can take years to move, and therefore you need that stretched period of time to ultimately achieve them. And that, in terms of changing those objectives, it takes multiple campaigns and multiple rounds of consistent messaging, not just a one-off. If you do have events or season conferences or anything else in your plan that you would typically do, then they would be in your roadmap as part of meeting one of your overall objectives. And it's not just a roadmap that you need to create. You need to have some fundamental parts underneath that really help make sure that your roadmap is successful. So the roadmap must be supported by tracking, measurement, and evolution, being really clear about what success looks like, what are those key metrics you're going to track, how can you do that, and ensure that every month we know exactly what they are and how activity is performing. You also will want to think about a colleague engagement plan around how you'll bring and keep, along a 3-year timeframe, colleagues on that journey with you. And finally, your roadmap should be supported by an ongoing customer research program. And it's something, if I'm honest, that I can't stress enough should happen. We see customer research happen, every year or every 3 years. And actually, when you're delivering a strategy with a roadmap, it's really important that you utilize customer research to get that continuous feedback and be on the front foot of any shifts in sentiment or customer behavior to evolve your activity accordingly. And actually, when creating the marketing strategy and gaining that important alignment, this is the time to scope objectives versus investment. So if we think about where we were on the left, so we've got our marketing budget, we might even pick up last year's plan and budget and go, actually, how much have we got? We think we've got, and that then drives what the plan is. However, on the right-hand side, when you're aligned to the strategy and the objectives, this is the time to scope investment. Sometimes one of your objectives might be so ambitious that it requires a wider business initiative. For example, if you wanted to change quality perception, you might need to create a new premium range of products that will help you to do that. That sort of initiative would span multiple departments across your business, and therefore it isn't just the role of marketing alone. And once you enter discussions around investments, you can then tailor how ambitious your objectives are versus how much investment you have. This will then help to drive the creation of the roadmap. And it's worth noting that investment must match realistic delivery of the objectives, and you have to have that alignment. There's no point saying that you'd like to increase brand awareness by, 25%, but then the investment that you have to do that is only £5,000, for example. They need to correlate accordingly to really set you and your teams up for success. So what are the benefits of moving to this different approach of a marketing strategy and roadmap? The first one is that you have focused teams on one roadmap, and it gives them the ability to plan much further out. We're not talking 1 to 2 months ahead. We should be planning along that roadmap around what the different objectives and projects and initiatives that we need to do to help deliver the effective things necessary to get to the objectives. It also helps us set internal boundaries around what is and isn't aligned to that roadmap. Another benefit is it helps to create better budget planning and more efficient production. You have one strategy and a creative platform that all activity sits within, determined by where you want your brand and business to go. You also, with a marketing strategy and roadmap, give the appropriate time to achieve those long-term objectives and see those perception and customer behavior changes that you need to see to help your brand grow. A final benefit is that it allows us to test, learn, and evolve rather than constantly revolutionize. Your tactics in your roadmap might change, but your overall strategy shouldn't. And finally, it actually delivers the results needed. It definitely helps you be really clear about what you're trying to achieve and setting out on that medium to long-term journey in order to get there. And this approach also leans into customer psychology around the link between repetition and effectiveness. So actually driving brand recall through advertising repetition is helped by consistently repeating key elements such as slogans, jingles, or visual cues. Think of L'Oreal because I'm worth it. Think of the Asda pocket tap. Think of the McDonald's golden arches. Those are those positive brand associations that ultimately strengthen recall. And that recall exists way beyond the length of a 2-month campaign period, for example. They stick in the mind of your customers for much longer time frame than that. A second part of that is around strengthening brand presence within the channel mix. So deploying activity across multiple channels allows for repetition of key messages across that suite of platforms, which reaches broader audiences and reinforces brand presence. And we've all seen this, the famous marketing rule of 7 is that a customer needs to see and hear an advertising message at least 7 times before they take action. So that's not about, simply repeating the exact same wording and the exact same message all the time. It's about consistently delivering similar types of the same message in order to nudge the customer to take the action that you require. And finally, there's a psychological impact of advertising repetition as it taps into the psychology of the familiar and cognitive biases. When people see and hear messages repeatedly, they subconsciously perceive them as more trustworthy and reliable, influencing their purchasing decisions. And one of the fundamental factors in the success of this approach is overcoming one of our biggest barriers that actually sits within ourselves. As marketing heads, we can sometimes feel internally that we have to be shouting loudly and producing shiny, new, different campaigns and content all the time. We've all been in those shoes, this competitor has done X, so we now need to do Y. And it's that itching feeling that exists within us, thinking about what's next or how can we be different and do something drastically, different to anything that's been done before. And we don't want to appear stagnant or boring or even repetitive, even though the latter works. Actually, the success lies within sitting within the uncomfortable. It's that feeling of not changing direction or deploying knee-jerk short-term shifts in what we're doing. It's having a strategy, having our heads down, focusing and executing it. We test and learn along the way, we get customer feedback and evolve where necessary. And this is all about playing the long game to achieve customer and commercial success. And a really good example of that, which I'm hoping we've all seen, is Food Love Stories by Tesco. So this platform and campaign actually ran for 6 years. So if there's any highlight to tell you that actually a 2-month to 12-month marketing plan isn't right, it's something like this sort of platform that is so rich, which is so dynamic and allows the brand to really go on a journey with the customer over a much longer time frame. And in 2017, Tesco wanted to rekindle the association between Tesco and food quality and reconnect with customers, which, as we know, is pretty much everyone in the country, so no easy task. And their original creative platform showcased home shop meals of customers making delicious recipes and dedicating them to their loved ones. However, 3 years into that platform, we had the pandemic, and they had to evolve that idea further as people physically couldn't be together sharing these recipes and delicious meals. And what they did was they stuck with the creative platform, but actually evolved it and showed the reality with glitchy Zoom connections and a new way of telling those stories. It's really important to note that Tesco wanted these ads to reflect the diversity of such a large customer base and the millions of different stories they had to tell. And rather than making something for everyone and risk bland ads that kind of try and speak to everyone all at the same time and receive a low emotional response, what they did was they decided to make many individual ads and let the overall effect of so many different stories create the wider impact, which is an interesting strategy in itself. They also realised through test and learn that the stories element would drive ad effectiveness rather than the recipes and the meals, and therefore later iterations focused more on those individual stories and the people behind them, also bringing in relevant events such as New Baby and Ramadan.
Yeah, it's a really nice example there, isn't it? I love the Love Stories case study. I think it was also really useful to sort of see that know the difference breakdown side, you know, Emma, because I think it tells us a bit more about the terminology. And like you say, each of those have different purposes. I have had it in the past where, you know, sometimes someone's talking about one thing, but actually something different is meant. So yeah, it's good to have that clarity. And I feel as though it definitely makes a lot more sense, having heard all of this, to break that cycle and to create this 3-year roadmap to really help alleviate those pressures. But also really great to see those other benefits too that you talked about. So in order to sort of deliver and get that clarity that's needed. But I think a key point is about the tactical budgets. So you were talking about objectives versus investment, and I think it really does help to stop thinking about, you know, we've got 3k here, so we'll do this, and we've got 4k there, so we'll do that. It's more about the investment that's needed in order to hit those business objectives. So yeah, really interesting. So with all of this in mind, we're keen to know obviously any tips that you might have moving forwards.
Well, the good news is I've got some tips up my sleeve, Alana, so I'll share those with everyone now. So the first tip is to really start by getting the right inputs to understand where you are today and really take your time to do that. That is not a 2-day endeavour. It's about making sure you really understand the full picture of where you sit in the landscape today. And, you know, whether that's a SWOT analysis, whether that's you might need additional customer research, it's making sure you really do have that full picture of what today looks like. A second tip would then be to identify the customer and market dynamics that will help shape the future. So if you're thinking about that 3-year strategy, you know, 3 to 5 year, and then the roadmap, there will be different dynamics that will come into play during that time frame that will help shape the future. That might be trends, that might be technology. It also might be more general things like an election or the Olympics or things like that actually will help shape different dynamics at different parts of time within that roadmap. You also want to align stakeholders on where you want to be in the future and that investment required. And again, that is a process in itself. It's making sure you have those conversations, those workshops, those collaborative discussions to make sure everyone is on that journey with you about where you want to be in the future and what investment you will need. And it's worth saying that it's good to spend time to make sure that strategy is right and you have those fundamentals before you start that roadmap. What we don't want to be doing is having a strategy and then doing the roadmap and then going back and tinkering the strategy later on, because that does not work. Another tip alongside your marketing strategy and roadmap is to create a colleague internal comms plan to really engage them and get them on the journey with you. Your colleagues are critical in the success of the delivery of your marketing roadmap. It is not an individual's endeavour by any stretch of the imagination. And finally, my top tip is to stick with it. Measure, review, and evolve the roadmap, but your strategy should always stay the same. And an underrated factor to success, which I think actually sometimes when you're talking about marketing strategy and marketing roadmaps, is the impact of customer experience. So you can have a killer strategy and a really focused roadmap, but if your customers can't easily buy from you or don't have the best experience, then you quite simply won't meet your objectives. And make sure in your early discussions with stakeholders that you continuously invest in improving your customer experience accordingly alongside that roadmap. And to be honest, I could probably do a masterclass on that myself in its entirety, because customer experience, I think, sometimes can be forgotten about when you're thinking about those bigger picture initiatives and objectives and how you'll deliver them. Actually, how your customers experience your business and brand is ultimately paramount to the delivery and success of any strategy. So let's talk about why you need the right expertise. And actually getting to the right marketing strategy requires both internal and external outputs. And it's that combination of both that leads to the best strategies moving forward. So the great thing about having external help is we can give an unbiased review of where you are today. We also can help challenge internal myths and perceptions. Sometimes it's easier for an external party to ask the question of, hang on, sorry, why do we believe that to be true? Or can we see the research where that statement came from? And think about what those internal perceptions and myths are and really start to break them down and actually overlay a layer of reality with that. Again, it might be more research, but actually it's about breaking those down and getting everybody on the same page about what they believe to be true about the customer. And we also act as a neutral third party that listens to and engages with colleagues with different perspectives across the business. It's something that I'm really passionate about whenever we're doing marketing strategy and brand transformation, is to make sure you really do listen to the expertise and perspectives of people from around the business, not just within your marketing department. An extra bonus is that it tends to also help bring them on the journey with you later on down the line. And actually, when we think about a lot of what we're doing in that upfront stages, there's usually a lot of documentation, a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different places where you have information in your business. And actually that external support and expertise has the ability to take in all of that complexity, analyze it, and then simplify it into the strategy. I sometimes think when we are internal in the business, we're a bit too close to that, and it makes that simplification really hard. So it's a really great time to bring in that external support when you need it. You also, when you work with external experts, we work with many brands across many industries, and actually there are a lot of learnings that we can apply to different industries and brands and challenges that will help ensure success. And I think, you really do want to think about outside of your industry or category, what other brands have faced a similar challenge to you and how did they overcome it? It's not about doing the same thing as such. It might just be that there are some little learnings or different ways of doing things that you can take into your marketing planning and help overcome some of a similar challenge. Finally, when you've got external experts, we have complete focus on the project without distractions. Your internal teams are obviously on multiple projects and priorities. And when you've got external support, they're able to hone in on the project, really get moving fast and deliver results quickly for you.
Great, really, really great tips there. Thanks, Emma. I definitely agree. It's good to get that sort of expert advice up front in the upfront stages. I've obviously sat with you in a lot of these workshops, and the first one I was really sort of blew my socks off, to be honest. They're really well structured, and we always get the most out of these sessions. It's obviously all about helping businesses as well on that journey and listening to different stakeholders. So, the more people that can come to that meeting, the more we can get out of it. But yeah, it's just to sort of have a really good debate and make sure that everyone is aligned. But also, like you're saying, Emma, I think it really does help to have a sort of external, unbiased review, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's not always the biases that you know about. There are those unconscious bias that exist. And I think actually when you come in from the outside, you're able to kind of strip that away and actually focus on what have you got and what is that picture, and really be clear with your business around what is that current landscape that you're currently operating in.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it was also really good to note, actually, one of your points earlier on about taking the rest of the business on that journey with you and making sure there's an internal comms plan to make sure that all of the teams know what you're doing. We've actually had it before where we've had briefs from different departments that have sort of overlapped and they're not aware. So I think when you've got everyone on that journey, everyone is obviously really clear on who's doing what. So yeah, great. Okay, so Emma, I'm going to let you conclude, and then it's time for a quick Q&A. So please start adding those questions if you have any questions to the chat now, if you haven't already done so. And Emma, I'll hand over to you to conclude.
No problem. So really, from this session, there are 3 key takeaways. The first one is that for most, the annual marketing plan quite simply doesn't work. And it's stressful, it's short term, it's reactive, and you don't see those longer term changes that you really want in order for your brand and business to grow. The second key takeaway is really to take the time to create and develop your marketing strategy, get that stakeholder alignment and the right level of investment to then inform your roadmap. And finally, bring in the right expertise where needed to help ensure that you and your business are set up for marketing success.
Amazing. Thanks, Emma. Loads of great advice and tips. And I think it's always really useful just to sort of summarize in 3 key takeaways. So yeah, we're going to open up now to invite questions from you. There's still time to pop questions into the chat. Emma, I'll start reading some that have come in. I can see one that's come in already from YouTube. So the first question we've got is, you mentioned keeping colleagues engaged. How do I do that across the 3-year roadmap?
That's a really great question. And I think it all really comes down to what is the role of the colleagues that you're trying to engage? Because you'll ultimately have some colleagues that are absolutely accountable for the delivery of that roadmap. And then you'll also have some broader colleagues that actually just want to be informed along the way. So for those colleagues that are involved in the actual delivery and execution of the roadmap, my advice would to make sure that it is baked into their individual performance objectives, and the successful delivery of the strategy is really inherently part of them being successful in their role. And for those broader colleagues who just need to be informed, actually, it's more about thinking about those kind of meeting cadences across your business. You know, it might be your annual meetings, it might be monthly updates where you can go in and provide an update on the strategy and how the activity is performing, and really keeping them engaged along the way. I think what we typically see is that colleagues either don't do an internal comms strategy or engagement strategy at all, or think that one slide in one update was enough and now everyone should know what the strategy is and what they should be doing. Or they do a good job up front, but actually then as the time goes on, it drops off. So I would build into your roadmap what those sequence of reviews and updates are, so that you're really, as we saw earlier, repetition works. You're repeating the strategy, you're engaging people with it, but also colleagues are really clear about what their role is in delivering the strategy as well.
Nice, lots of great advice there. So I've got another question here. How do you control reactivity within the roadmap?
Good question. And I think this is where, an element of the realistic point of view within marketing comes in. So it's safe to say there will always be an element of reactivity in your roadmap. And there's those curveballs that we don't see coming, and even things, like weather or customer behavior changes. But actually, a good practice when you're in that planning stage is to think about what variables in your experience typically result in that reactivity, and then set guidance around what that might look like and also how long for. It's also worth noting that when you're with internal stakeholders, think about a process for how you'll manage those reactive requests. If, you know, a department suddenly says to you, we want to talk about X and Y, think about what your process will be for managing that request, and also when you might need to say no.
Yeah, good point. Okay, I will just find one more. So how do you change business mindset around marketing being a 12-month cycle with a tactical plan?
That's a really good question. And actually, when you've got that overall business mindset, it can be really hard to shift that. You know, if for the last 10 years it's always been done this way and you've always been on that cycle, how do you suddenly go, no, I don't think we should be doing this anymore? I should add that you might want to send them a link to this masterclass, Alana. But instead, what you might want to do is talk to your business stakeholders around why that process doesn't work. And again, it's all about bringing them on the journey with you, that listening to their expertise, that collaboration. But also some advice from me would be to make sure that you also are bringing on the journey those challenging stakeholders. They're the ones for me that you need to convince the most and help them become the advocates of what you're doing. It's also worth noting that marketing can be guilty, as any other department, of existing in a silo. So as a marketing leader, you sometimes think, you know, I'm doing the strategy. This is, you know, I need to look inwards, do my strategy, and then execute it. But actually, as a marketing leader, it's your responsibility and in your interest to really work with your peers across the business to be clear on what marketing stands for and break down those barriers to help ultimately change that mindset.
Yeah, it's a good point, especially sort of challenging stakeholders as well. Yeah, okay. Thanks so much. That brings us to the end of our Q&A. We do have a couple of exciting things to end on. So firstly, if you'd like to sign up to our newsletter, feel free to scan the QR code showing now. This will take you through to our website, and you can sign up and hear all about sort of key themes each month, and how our experts are solving lots of different business challenges. So I'll give you a chance to quickly scan that QR code, and then we will end on our giveaway.
Ooh, exciting.
So as Emma mentioned at the start, we have a bonus giveaway. After this session, I know someone's just written on LinkedIn, I think, will the session be sent around? It will. So we will follow up with an email with a link to watch the webinar back so you can recap on anything. But also in that email, there'll be a link to click, which will give you the chance to win a free consultation with Emma. So it will be the fastest finger first when we send the email. So don't forget to watch out for that, and obviously click for your chance to win, and we will be in touch if you are the lucky winner. And super, I think, yeah, I mean, if you have any questions, you have our email addresses from the start. Please don't hesitate to reach out. If we didn't get around to any of your questions today, we would love to hear from you, and we can come back to you on those individually. And I think that concludes for today. So I'll say thank you so much to you, Emma, and thank you so much to everyone else as well for taking time out of your day to come and join us. And we hope you have a great rest of the week, and pray for sun.